Hi, this is Pastor Dave. Welcome to another message in our series entitled The Storyteller Chronicles. Today's message is on the Old Testament character Jonathan. So grab your coffee, pen, or pencil, whatever you like, sit back and choose to really hear what God's saying through this story from His Word today and plan on it impacting your life as we go.
Who remembers last week we started Storyteller Chronicles? Who did we talk about? Who did we talk about? What character from the Bible did we talk about? Yes, Abraham. Anybody remember when he lived? Long time ago. That's absolutely correct. Anybody remember roughly about when? 4,000 years ago. Roughly, yeah. So what I did today is I dug out this awesome Answers in Genesis 7 Seas of History timeline, which, by the way, I believe that is something that the company that Nathan basically runs, okay, can supply you with one of these timelines and lots of other awesome Christian books and curriculum if you're a homeschool parent or if you're looking for some really awesome stuff. Get Nate's number and you can contact New Leaf Press, Master Book, and they have all kinds of awesome books. All different subjects from a Christian standpoint. He's one of the sales staff there. So, okay. So this timeline, I encourage you to come up and take a look at after church. Just don't trip over the wires and stuff. This goes from creation to the present and has all kinds of things in here, including just secular events that happened in history. So I'm going to take Abraham, roughly 2000 BC, and I'm going to stick him right about... BC goes backwards, Dave. Right about here. Okay, Abraham was right about here, okay? So in the grand scheme, that's about where Abraham fell, okay? We are going to talk about a new character today that some of you know about and some of you don't. His name is Jonathan, okay? Anybody want to guess about when Jonathan lived? Jonathan in the Bible. Good buddy of David. Anybody have a guess of when Jonathan lived? About 3,000 years ago, you think? Bang. Perfect. About 1045 BC. So I'm going to stick him up here, and we're going to talk about him. I think it's important for you guys to have a little bit of an idea on the timeline when things happened, where they were. Okay, this is 1,000 years later, and he only moved about that far on this timeline, okay? Just for reference, right here, the wall takes a significant turn right here, okay? So does history. This is about when Jesus was born, right about here, okay? So where history takes a significant turn, that's when Jesus came into the world to save us all, okay? So that's how you know where that is. Okay, a little bit of information about Jonathan. Jonathan was a good buddy of David. They were incredibly close friends, okay? Let me read the scripture for you. Ecclesiastes. Now, interestingly enough, this verse was written by David's best friend Jonathan's best friend in the world, David. His son wrote this. And I wonder if some of Solomon's wisdom about friendship came from his understanding of what his dad and Jonathan were as friends. Because they were in a situation as friends that had some really heavy details going on, okay? This verse in Ecclesiastes, written by King Solomon, probably the wisest man ever to live, says, "Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their toil." It says two are better than one. Friends are incredibly important in this world. Incredibly important. A spouse as a friend is an incredibly important friend. But friends other than a spouse, just good friends, are very important. Why? Because they have a good return for their toil. Let me tell you, that just doesn't just mean that two guys can build a deck faster than one guy can twice. When you have a good friend, they can help you to know things about yourself that you might not have known otherwise. They can help you to be more open to what God's doing in your life. They can help you not to make bad decisions, and they can really help hold you up. Okay, you guys in the front row here, do any of you guys have a really, really close friend? Levi, who's your really, really close friend? Eli and Levi, look at that. Yeah, they're cousins, but they're really close friends too, right? Caleb, who's not in here right now, his cousin Reese lives in Knoxville, but they are super close. Where is he? Oh, he's over there on the couch. Yeah. So they live far apart, but when they get together, it's like they've been brother and sister living in the same house forever and ever. They just are really close. And there's something that adds to your life inside of that friendship. So I want to tell you a little bit of a story about Jonathan. So in the history of Israel, we talked about Abraham. He's the father of the whole Jewish nation, right? So Abraham lived about 2,000 years BC. He was born, and God said, I'm going to take you and move you to a new place. I'm going to give you a whole land, and I'm going to make a massive nation out of you, and through you, all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed. And eventually, he had a son who had a son who had a son who had a son who had a son, and Jesus came through that line. He was born inside of that line, okay? So you have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons. They end up in Egypt. Pharaoh, let my people go. The movie 10 Commandments. That's Moses about 400 years later. They start coming out of Egypt. And then you have a time of the judges. And then you have a time all of a sudden where Israel says, we want a king. And God says, I'm kind of offended at that. And the people say, but we want a king. And so Samuel at that time is a prophet. And we're going to talk about Samuel in a few weeks. But Samuel was a prophet of God at that time, and God said, listen, don't worry, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. We will give them a king, a man to look to instead of looking to God, okay? So King Saul is the first king Israel ever has. And he's a pretty good guy to start with, but within a couple of years, he's kind of taken things under his own rule, and he does some things. He really kind of rejects God's plan in some stuff, and God rejects him as king and tells Samuel, go anoint someone in the house of Jesse. She's exactly backwards. So I'm Jesse's dad, but in the Bible, Jesse is David's dad, okay? So he goes to the house of Jesse, and Jesse's oldest son comes out, and Samuel thinks, well, surely this is the man. He's tall and handsome. He's got to be the guy. And God says, not him. Next son, not him, not him, not him, not him, not him, not him. Do you have any more sons? And Jesse says, well, I got the little ruddy kid out watching the sheep. Call him in. He's like, okay. Here comes David, and God says, that's the one. And he anoints him as the next king of Israel. Okay? Before that even happened, there's this awesome story where Saul is facing the Philistines. The Philistines are like the bad guy in the story, and the whole time of Saul and David and all these guys, they're the bad guys. So what happens is the Philistines are camped up on this ridge, and Saul is camped kind of to the west, and Jonathan's got a little group of guys kind of south of that, and there's this valley that runs like this, and the Philistines are camped up on this ridge. Now here's what's crazy. The Bible says that no one in all of Israel had a sword or a spear, because the Philistines had oppressed them. They took all their swords and spears, and if they wanted their plows sharpened, they had to go to the Philistines and have them sharpened. If they wanted an axe head sharpened, they had to go to the Philistines to sharpen it. If they wanted any tool sharpened, they had to go and have their enemies do it for them, so the enemies knew exactly what was going on. Okay? No Second Amendment rights at all. Okay? None. So, Saul has a sword and a spear, and his son Jonathan has a sword and a spear, but no one else does, but they're like grouped up like they're going to go fight the Philistines with no weapons. Okay? So Jonathan decides he's going to kind of sneak over this way, and he comes to a spot where he says to his armor bearer, so that one guy got to carry his weapons, but he didn't have any of his own. He says to his armor bearer, tell you what, let's go down into the valley in between these two ridge walls, and let's let our enemies see us. They have bows and spears and arrows in the whole. Let's go out in the open and let them see us. And if they say to us, hey, come up here to us, then we will know that God has delivered them into our hand. That sounds like an awesome plan, doesn't it? If you were the armor bearer, would you have been like, hold on a minute here. Let's go over this. We are currently hiding from the bad guys. And your plan is to go with, and you only have weapons. I don't get the sword or anything. No, okay. We're going to go out in the open where they can shoot us and wave. And if they say, come up here, then we'll go up there and we'll know that God has delivered them into our hands. Jonathan says, yes, you have been listening. The guy says, do whatever is in your heart, I'm with you. So this guy was also crazy, okay? So they go out into the open, and the Philistines say, hey, come up here to us. So they go up the side of the ridge, and when they get to the top, they kick some tail, and it's an amazing victory for the children of Israel. Now, a little side detail in here, Saul, being the guy who takes everything into his own hands, really wants to win this battle. So he says, if anybody eats anything this whole day, he will be killed. If we don't nobody eats anything until we destroy the enemy. He's trying to motivate him or something. So all these guys are famished. Well, Jonathan, because he's camped south over here with his armor bearer, he didn't know that. He found some honey and ate it and went and kicked some butt. So that was a really awkward moment. And basically what happens is Saul's like, somebody ate something, whoever did it, he's going to die even if it's me or if it's my son. Well, it was his son. But the people ransomed Jonathan out of that somehow. They paid somehow, some way, for Saul to relent in taking his own son's life for eating honey before the enemy was destroyed. So Saul had just some lack of judgment in places because he was walking away from just listening to what God was asking him to do and doing it, okay? So that's an awesome story about Jonathan. And that story is actually found in the book of 1 Samuel chapter 14. I want to skip ahead of that to 1 Samuel 18, and I want to read just a little bit of the beginning of 18. Now, I want you to realize you've all heard the story of David and Goliath, right? Goliath comes out, send a man out to face me, and if he kills me, then we will serve you, and if I kill him, you will be our servants. And, you know, he's making fun of God, and David shows up, and he's like, I'll go fight him. And he was just a kid. He was probably like Jesse's size. Thin kid. Says he was ruddy. David, the story with David and Goliath and all these stories, Jonathan had already done the story I just told you about. He was doing amazing things before David even came on the scene. They were probably somewhere near the same age, okay? So after David kills Goliath, he comes in, he's talking to Saul. David is this mighty warrior, even though he's just a little kid. And so David is before Saul, and Saul doesn't want to let him go home. He wants to keep him as a person who lives in his house and a servant of his and a warrior of his, okay? The beginning of 1 Samuel 18 says, as soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan gave to David all his robe that was on him. He gave it to David. His armor, even his sword, his bow, and his belt. And David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him, so that Saul set him over men of war. And this was good in the sight of all the people and also in the sight of Saul's servants. So Jonathan and David became incredibly close friends. Now let me tell you, this says that the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. There are going to be people that enter your life that outside of any decision of your own, you are drawn to loving them. There may be someone you come across in church here that there's just something about that person that you have a heart for them. Pay attention to that. There are times when God ordains relationships in your life when He wants you to pour into a life, to give someone some time, to love on them and to encourage them in His way and walking toward Him. I can tell you, you've all heard the stories of I've spent hours and hours and hours with Mormon missionaries. There are a few of them that God has knit my heart to. There's a young man by the name of Blake. I don't know what it is, but I believe there will be a day when we both are serving the Lord and we are like brothers. Whether we ever live in the same area, I don't know. There's another young man by the name of Matt. He came back to Gowanda to visit after a couple of years. He had been back home and married and have a career, and he came back to visit Gowanda, and he came and saw me. And when I saw him, I walked up to him and gave him a hug. And we had a close relationship, although he was only in Gowanda for maybe a couple of months. But God puts these people in your life, and He wants you to do something with that. But in this busy world, we have to give ourselves permission to just spend some time with those people. The most important people He puts in most of our lives is our kids. If your heart is knit to your kids, which it is, teach them, raise them, take time with them, equip them to live in this world because they need you to equip them. There's our 1 Samuel 14 and 18. The story of Jonathan starts with that big thing, and then this is where his heart is into David's. I want to read you a verse from Proverbs 18. Proverbs 18:24. It says, "A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother." That means you could have all kinds of people you know. You could have connections, associates, business partners. But everybody needs to have a friend in your life that is like a brother or closer than a brother. Those stories are so interesting. Those people in your life. I'll bet you every one of you has a story of that someone in your life that you can't necessarily explain it, but there is a tie between you and a friend. Okay? And you could not see them for years, and somehow that tie is still there. I want to take a minute and tell you about one of mine, okay? And it's amazing that this has it's a recent thing for me, and there's some really interesting details. So here's my story. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, one Lent, which is a lot more important time in people who are Catholic, will celebrate Lent. And what they do is for 40 days, coming up toward Easter, they will give up something. Lots of people will give up sweets, or they'll go on a bit of a diet or give something up for Lent to kind of prepare their heart, okay? My dad one year decided instead of giving up sweets, he wanted to do something really meaningful. So he decided that he was going to read the Bible for an hour a day for Lent. And he did that. And he began coming across scriptures in the New Testament that started saying things like, "For none is righteous, no, not one. For to him who works and is paid, it's accounted to him as a wage, not a gift. But blessed is the one who trusts in him who justifies the ungodly and doesn't work. For his faith is accounted to him as righteousness. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. For by righteous works of the law is no man saved. For we are saved by grace through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast." He had never heard these words in his life. And he felt as though the Word of God was coming to life before him, and he was meeting who God really was and understanding what this life was really about, and understanding finally how to be saved and how to be right with his Creator. And he took our family and he moved our family. At that time, we were attending a Catholic church, and he moved us to this church, okay? So we went like from one end of the spectrum to the other, denominationally, okay? Now, part of what happened in there is I went to a little little Catholic school in North Collins for kindergarten, first, second grade. For third and fourth grade, I came over to St. Joe's. When I came to St. Joe's, a friend of mine who I had kind of met was going there. I knew his family from the church we went to in Collins Center. And we became incredibly close friends. I would spend time at his house. We were looked for fossils. We thought a couple times we found dinosaurs. We would fish together, Bill. We did everything together. And when our family moved to this church, that connection was just kind of lost. And I felt for 33 or 4 years that I had lost like a brother. I mean, we were so close. And every April, I knew his birthday was either the 5th or the 8th. And every year I thought, I'm going to send him a card. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I did. Might have been 10 years ago. I bought a card. I found out which one was his birthday, and I mailed him a card, but I didn't hear anything back. And I said things in the card like, I miss you. And when I start to talk that way, like, it's emotional for me. Like, we were like brothers, and I missed him, and I still think about the times we would drag an old car hood behind the snowmobile in the snow, and the time we tied up his brother with a hose and his other brother turned it on, and then he was choking and we couldn't get it off. Okay? I remember walking up the stairs into his bedroom and looking down and seeing his mom and dad praying at the foot of their bed. I remember scaling fish with him, and I remember feeding the chickens with him and beating up his brother and teasing his sister, and I remember the inside of their house and all the things we used to do. Well, probably 3 years ago, I was at Walmart, and I ran into him in the parking lot. I was like, man, I haven't seen you in like forever. How's everything, you know? He was there with one of his daughters or something, and we talked just for a couple of minutes, and off we went. And I just thought, I just wonder if that was as meaningful to him as it was to me. And off you go. A week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, we're in Aldi in Springville. And around the corner walks my friend and his wife. We ended up standing and talking for about 40 minutes in Aldi. And at one point, his wife was in a conversation, and he said, we were like brothers. And I said, you have no idea how much it means to me to hear you say that. And I agree that we were brothers. And you know how I know we were brothers? I would say things to you that I would never say to any of my other friends. Like when I got mad, I would just lay into him like you would with your brother or sister. And you wouldn't, you know what I mean? You can just be mean to your brothers and sisters where you don't to other friends. And that's how it was. I told him he was a duck-footed bonehead one day. I'll never forget that. Running around in our cowboy boots on the parking lot over by Bentley's playing Nerf football. He's made me mad sometimes, you know? But it was, to run into him, it was like, it felt like neither of us wanted to say goodbye. Like we both had wondered if the other missed them over these 30-some years, and both of us did. So I got his number, and that night we texted back and forth for probably 2 hours and just talked about, hey, what do you guys like to do? What do you guys like to go hiking or camping? What? And we got to get together. Well, I'm free this day and that day. We haven't gotten together yet, but we're going to. And my last memory as a boy with my friend was walking through a field by his parents' house talking about the Bible. And I hope we get to talk about that again. Not because he needs to be like me or I need to be like him, but I want to know his heart. I want to know his God story. And I want to share mine with him. because I love him. Here's the amazing thing. My name's David. Guess what his name is? John. His name is John. I just realized that like 2 days ago, and I was like, oh my goodness. I'm talking about friends and how meaningful they are. And I'm talking about Jonathan. And part of the story is 2 little boys whose hearts are knit together, whose names are David and John. Today, I want to encourage you to be present. There are people God has laid on your heart. Call them. Have a picnic with them. Some of them are your kids. I was raised to work my tail off. It's hard for me to shut that off. That's a place I need to work. I need to turn it off and have some time and just have some fun. I don't do that easily, okay? Sorry, Braid. I beat you up good, right? Wrestle on the couch. Right, Squeeze? Yeah. There's so much life in that. And if it wasn't important, God wouldn't have taken the time and opportunity to inspire men to write it in this word. He wouldn't have said in Ecclesiastes, 2 are better than 1. He wouldn't have said this. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Remember one of the Bible writers said, I must decrease and he must increase. If we can decrease and let him increase in our lives, the people around us, their value goes through the roof, and it becomes natural to prefer them and love them, right? To love is to do what's best for that person. To love is to share your faith with an unsaved friend. That's love. If you don't because it feels kind of awkward, that's loving you more than them. Loving your own comfort more than them. Share your heart and love them. Take time to help people. And I just want to encourage you to have friends.
As we close our message today, one thing you may not be hearing, you're probably not hearing on the online version of this, is we usually close our services with prayer, and very often inside of that short time will be really a call to salvation. And that message is so simple. As human beings, we are sinful. All of us are. And there's nothing we can do to pay for our own sin. And so we come to a realization that the only answer for us is to take the free gift that was made available to us through the death of Jesus Christ, through his blood shed on the cross. There is a payment available for us to wash our sin away. Now, what we do to claim that free gift is we recognize the fact that we are sinful. As human beings, we are sinful, and we choose to turn away from that sin as much as we possibly can. And we ask him to apply that blood to our lives to wash our sin away. And from there, it's our desire to have him rule in our lives and take ownership of our life from there. This is the way I put it. It's kind of a series of statements. The first one is, this is really bad. You know, as human beings, we are covered with sin just because of our nature. We are sinful. And in God's presence, it's literally the contrast between white and black, clean and just covered with sin. Statement number 2 is, there's nothing I can do to wash this away. Statement number 3 is, Lord, you can wash this away. Number 4 is, please do, Lord, please do wash away my sin. And number 5, the hinge pin of it is, here's the keys. Inside of that decision is a willful act of turning over the keys of your life to him. So the statements go, Lord, this is really bad, and I can't change this. I can't wash my sin away, but you can, Lord. I know that you can, and I ask you to do that, Lord. Please wash my sin away, and here are the keys. So as we close up this sermon, I pray that that's a decision that you have made or are making now, and that your life would be in his hands, and that eternity would become secure for you because of the payment made for you by Jesus Christ. I hope you have a wonderful week, and please access us through Facebook or give us a phone call at the church, 716-532-5038 anytime. We care about you, and we endeavor to put into your lives, and this is just one of the places we do that. Have a great week.